Hello, seniors, and welcome to the third part of your AP Government Review. In this portion, we'll be talking about political parties, interest groups, mass media. It's all the things that we're discussing on the Monday that some of you are taking your AP Psychology test. So, just as a reminder, political parties, the idea was that probably they were not so great. Remember, George Washington warns against factions, warns against them, but really by 1800 they're kind of there to stay. Today we have what we call a two-party system, Republicans, Democrats. There have been third parties over time. However, we really have stuck to the main two. The goals of political parties are usually to get someone in office that has the same beliefs as the supporters, and so people join political parties so that they can have more influence, they can have more power. So basically the characteristics are they serve as the intermediary between you and the government. So they're made up of grassroots members, you, activist members, and leadership. A grassroots member is someone that you are willing to go out and vote. An activist member is someone who is willing to go out to campaign, and then leadership are people that are like saying day to day, here's what the party is doing. We organize them to raise money, to present positions on policy, to get a candidate elected to office. And these are not anywhere in the Constitution. Remember that if political parties went away tomorrow, that would be fine constitutional-wise. So, question. Hopefully you can answer it. Question. Should be able to answer it. So make sure that you can really talk about how, who would be in what political party and why. We spent a really long time on that. If you need a review, listening to the last PowerPoint would be helpful. Also, going over this small packet, like the review packet, would be probably a really good idea. Here's an example of an FRQ that you might get. So over the last century, the power of political parties has been gradually declining. So explain why that is in terms of financing, also in terms of what people actually care about. If you have questions on this, please come talk to me. If you're not in class today and you want extra credit, you can write the full FRQ on this. Okay, party organization. They hold a national convention every 4 years to nominate the presidential candidate. This is, remember, after the primaries where they say, okay, so this is the person who's going to be the person that we will have for the rest of the election cycle. So if it's the Democratic primary, you may have 10 candidates, and then they narrow it down to one candidate who will then be the contender. Remember that you have a convention, but you do not pick a new candidate if you have a president who's the incumbent. The National Committee is the thing between the national conventions, and it stands to manage the party affairs. So basically the National Committee will put out pamphlets, put out various things. National chairman is the day-to-day party manager of the committee. They're going to have quite a deal of power. And then a caucus is the meeting of the party members to decide on the delegates in support of a party. Remember, caucus is really any time people group together. So we've used this term in various systems. So there are different party systems. One party system would be just you have one political party, they always win. Two-party system is what we have. Multi-party system is what many other foreign countries have, and it's where you may have 6 or 7 different political parties, and all of them are viable candidates. We have many different political parties, however, not all of them are actually viable candidates. Some more information on the two-party system, make sure you know about it. Okay, why we do this, a lot of it has to do with the debate between the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. When we started, there were basically two sides. As I've said time and time again, the real issue that political parties get back to is state versus federal power. And so since that's the main issue they're going with, it makes a lot of sense that there are two main parties. These parties, as we talked about, change name over time and time again. So they may have been called the Anti-Federalists, then they're called the Democrats, etc., etc. But they are going to stand for one issue or another. Our electoral system of winner take all, because you have to get to a certain number of votes before you can win, means that if there are 3 or 4 contenders, it's going to be very hard for one candidate to get the majority of the votes. So when we think about the election of 1824 with Andrew Jackson, where it has to go to the House of Representatives and we get the corrupt bargain and all of that, that's because there are 4 contenders running in that election. So third parties can be grouped for various reasons. Ideologically, so they're formed out of a principle. So like libertarians who are formed because they want small government interference, or socialists because they want a socialist government. Splinter parties that break off from main parties, just like a splinter breaks off a piece of wood. So the Bull Moose Party would be an example of this. They break away from the Republicans. Single issue like free soil, all they want is the end of slavery. Protest parties like the Populist Party, things of that nature. Okay, here is a political cartoon. Questions. I think that it is highly probable that you get one on your AP test that either has a political cartoon or a graph that you have to answer. So make sure that you could do this. As I said, I think that these are some of the probably the easier ones, just because even though you do have to think through the graph, like they do have information in this political cartoon or in a graph that you can use to answer your question. So go ahead and write this if you weren't in class. You can turn in for extra credit. All right, so what do political parties do? Well, they recruit candidates, so they figure out who should be running for different offices. We often just talk about like the president, vice president, those sorts of offices, but you need to have everybody through like city councilmen. So there may be elections in which there's not a Democrat running, so the Democratic Party may try and find people to fill these positions. They nominate and support candidates for office. They educate the electorate, i.e. give out information, help to organize the government, etc. So we spent an entire day and then some, and we could say we spent all of last year talking about the history of political parties over time. So make sure that you could explain how this happened. We say that after 1968, really like after Nixon and with all of the craziness from Watergate, we have what we call divided government, where we can't say that it's more Republican or more Democrat, that it kind of flips back and forth each time. And this is all part of that polarization, where, again, I will emphasize this, polarization is when things become more divided, things become more contrasted between one another. Okay, so this multiple choice question you should be able to answer. Let's go ahead and answer it. Okay, and then the answer to it with its explanation. All right, so elections. Elections that have party realignments are when basically we shift from one to another. So a realignment election would be any election in which we switch. So you could say that the 2008 election was a realignment election. Split ticket is when you vote for candidates of different parties in the same election. So you get just a ballot, and so you don't vote straight Democratic. You may vote for some Republican candidates, some Libertarian candidates, some Democratic candidates, depending on it. Straight ticket is where you just like bubble in, yes, I want like all of this. So interest groups are anybody that wants to influence policy. Just like you join political parties because you want power, you join interest group because you want power. My single voice by itself can't do too terribly much. Even if you're all watching this on YouTube, that's still not going to spread terribly far. However, I could, join with people that are like-minded. We could then make more of a presence, because the more people you have, the more votes you have, therefore the more influence you have. So these are people that share an interest, and they usually lobby and really try and like get their point of view across. They can be lobbying someone on a presidential, a senatorial, really any level of government. So there are different sorts of interest groups. We spent a really long time on these. Many times they have to do with work. Sometimes they have to do with age, gender, things of this nature. Okay, incentives, make sure you know them. I'm hoping that you remember what incentives are, but just remember that these are, things that you would want. Political action committees, PACs, they donate money to politicians. There have been all kinds of different reforms, different things saying how much you can or cannot give. Currently, the contribution limits are as follows. We did a whole bunch on Citizens United and what exactly that meant for campaign finance, but there's a big struggle and there is a lot of questions about where we should be placing limits on this. Is money speech? If so, does that give like some sort of unfair influence to people that have money over people who do not, etc. Okay, question. Make sure that you can answer it. Again, if you get caught up on one of the parts, remember just skip that part, label it really carefully. So let's say that you are able to identify a goal of interest groups that they want to get candidates elected, political party also that they want to, and let's say that you just get stuck on C. You can only think of one way or you can't think of any. Just skip that and go straight on down to D. Remember, I've said time and time again, read through all the questions, figure out which one you know the best, write that one first, and then write the one you know second, the one you know third, the one you know fourth. Even if you only know part A or you only know part D, at least put that down because they can give you like 1 point for that. All right, so we have limits on lobbying. This has been done, really over time. Really, this has been mostly in the 20th and 21st century. We've looked and said, maybe it isn't fair that money is influencing politics so much. And this is still an incredibly controversial issue, but just know that there have been various laws on it and court cases. Here is another one. Again, you may be able to answer part or all. Of course, always try and answer all. For one of this length, probably you would only have about a page and a half worth of explanation because it's just an explain. So you're explaining point 1, point 2, point 3. All right, so mass media play a huge role in what we know about politicians. Newspapers, not so much, because remember, when you do your current events, it's hard for you to find them if they're not online. Hence, the internet now becomes one of the most widespread sources. So if it's on the internet, usually we find it, we view it. Television is very influential. However, many, huge portions of people aren't watching TV. We talked about if you're getting news, you're mostly getting them from your phone app, like the CNN app or something like that. You're not sitting down at 5:30 every night to watch the nightly news. Remember which demographics are getting information from each. So the younger you are, the more likely you are to be getting news from the internet. The older, the more from newspapers or television. So the media plays many important roles. They inform the public, they shape public opinion, they kind of tell us how to feel about things. They serve as a link between citizens and the government. They show the government if we're protesting, if we're unhappy. They can be a watchdog group, so think like Watergate. They find out information about scandals and then share them with us. Also agenda setting. There are lots of rules governing the media. Think about what you can and cannot say on TV. Also, they can always be sued for libel, obscenity, things like this. Just know sort of that there are limits to this freedom of the press, that we do believe that there is a fundamental freedom of the press, but there is limit to it. Okay, question? Should be able to answer it. Make sure that you can answer C. If you cannot, you should probably come in and talk to me. Question, again, this is the sort that they would give you with a chart that you would be able to use a lot of the information in the chart to answer. So even if you couldn't define what a policy agenda is, you could definitely answer part D where you explain what's going on in the chart. All right, so that is all of this portion. Hopefully you are able to review this and write each of the FRQs. If you are not, please come see me before or after school.